practical action alongside strategic and implementing partners Hystra and Bopping. The event and our State of the Sector report have come about thanks to funding from UK Aid under the Transforming Energy Access Programme. So here's the agenda for today's event. In part one, we'll present the State of the Sector 2022 report to highlight progress and impact since 2019. In part two, we'll launch the GDC strategy for the next 3 years, what we want to achieve and how we'll get there. And then finally, in part three, we'll move into breakout groups where you can choose which speaker you'd like to talk to. These groups will be informal and unstructured and a place for you to chat, ask questions and share experiences. Feel free to drop any questions into the chat as we go along. So we've got a great lineup today. So you'll be hearing from Ajata Shah, founder and CEO of Frontier Markets, Sitan Mandalia, co-founder and CEO of Solaris Off-Grid, William Panella, founder and CEO of Zonful Energy, Prashanth Venkataramana, co-founder and CEO of S-Smart, and then Holger Seek, project manager of the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. So you'll get a chance to hear from these speakers briefly in the main session, but then more intimately in the breakout groups. You'll also be hearing from members of the GDC team. So Emma Collenbrander is on the line, but she's not feeling well today, so won't be presenting anymore. We've also got Lucy Clarsfield-McGrath, partner from Hystra, Emil Schmitz, the managing director at Bopping, and Charlotte Taylor, the communications and impact manager at the GDC. So let's dive into part one, understanding the state of the last mile distribution sector. So some of you may recognize this, the State of the Sector report, which we put out in 2019. It provided the very first overview of the last mile distribution sector and what distributors look like. This report was pretty groundbreaking at the time, but a great deal has happened since this report was published, not least of all, the COVID-19 pandemic. So it goes without saying that the pandemic has had a profound influence on distributors, has been the driving force behind many of the key trends we have observed, and will continue to shape the last mile distribution sector and virtually every other sector for many years to come. So given the pandemic and all the changes over the last 3 years, we felt that now was an opportune moment to step back and ask, how has the sector evolved? What progress has been made? And what does the future look like for distributors? So our findings are based on a survey conducted with 132 GDC members, as well as insights, data and case studies gathered since 2019, drawing on GDC membership and beyond. So before we go any further, we'd like to share an overview of the profile of GDC members. Note that this is a reflective of our membership, but not necessarily the sector as a whole. So our members currently operate across 58 countries, with nearly 80% in Africa. Members sell a range of products, with 68% selling more than one product category. Off-grid solar products are the most common category. Members sell through a range of distribution channels. The vast majority sell direct to consumer through sales agents, but nearly half sell through retail, and the same also sell through community channels like schools, health clinics, and cooperatives. Most of our members are fairly well established. On average, they've been operating for around 7 years. Members have reached, on average, 217,000 people to date. 69% of those people live in poverty on less than $3.20 a day, and 80% are rural. Nearly all members offer after-sales service, and more than 3/4 offer consumer financing. Over 3/4 of our members are local companies. So in other words, they are wholly owned or partially owned by people from the country or countries in which they operate. Okay, so let's move on. So overall, we have good news. The last mile distribution sector is growing and achieving higher levels of impact. So this graph shows the annual revenues of 112 distributors who have been GDC members since 2019-2020. And as you can see, there is a 21% increase in those reporting annual revenues of more than $100,000 US, and an 8% increase in those reporting annual revenues of more than $500,000. So this is translating into increased impacts. As we saw already, the average number of people reached by GDC members is 217,000. This is an increase of 29% from the 167,000 in 2019. And obviously this is despite the COVID pandemic. So the sector has had some churn among young, small companies, but not as much as we expected. So 26 companies, around 13% of our 2019-20 membership, are either confirmed as closed or very likely to have closed, given online activity has ceased. A small number of these distributors were relatively large companies that had raised substantial investment, most notably in Nyeri and New Light Africa. And the primary reason for closure for these larger players was lack of funding. But there are a sizable majority of distributors who closed who were small, with 69% having annual turnover of less than $100,000. So little is known about why most of these companies closed. We assume some closed due to disruption from COVID-19 and expect to see more companies go under for this reason. But we also know of closures unrelated to the pandemic. So for example, Veritas Vision distributed health and energy products in Nigeria to 5,000 last mile customers during its 3 years of operations. And they closed in May 2020 due to founder burnout, lack of funding, and challenges of doing business in Nigeria, particularly fundraising and security. So challenges faced by distributors in 2022 are largely unchanged since 2019. As you can see, access to finance is still the main challenge faced by GDC members, with 70% citing it as their top challenge. This is the case for members of all sizes, but unsurprisingly is experienced most acutely by smaller members. We'll dive into the access to finance challenge and emerging solutions shortly. A higher proportion of larger members struggle with refining their processes, particularly around sales and marketing, managing sales agents and retailers, as well as team capacity. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Charlotte Taylor, who will take us through the 4 key trends that we've seen in the sector over the last 3 years.
Thanks very much, Jess. Okay, so let's dive straight into trend 1, access to finance. Distributors have been successful in raising funding even during COVID-19. 62% of our members have raised at least one kind of funding since 2019, with 46% having raised grants, 36% having raised debt, and 21% having raised equity. This graph shows the percentage of members that raised capital in the last 2 years. Unsurprisingly, international distributors are more likely to have raised grant and debt funding than local distributors. And although local distributors are more likely to have raised equity, previous GDC research found that this primarily comes from friends, family, and angel investors, who were the main source of equity for 66% of members in 2019. Nonetheless, as we saw earlier, access to finance continues to be the most cited barrier. Previous GDC research has found that distributors face similar fundraising challenges in their early stages, with a dearth of startup capital and smaller working capital loans. Challenges then vary depending on growth strategy. For distributors focusing on geographic expansion, who require capital, often equity, to fund fixed costs in new geographies, it is increasingly difficult to find equity investors with realistic growth and return expectations. On the other hand, distributors focusing on achieving profitability first have either chosen not to raise equity due to the costs and complexity of the process and the desire to retain business ownership, or have tried and been unable to do so. The struggles to raise working capital across the board have forced some distributors to take on equity, either to cover working capital needs or purely to be able to raise debt. Fortunately, we are seeing more fit-for-purpose solutions emerging. Funders are increasingly recognizing that profitability is not always linked to scale. There are different growth and profitability models requiring different investment instruments. As you can see from this quote, funders like Acumen are rethinking how they deploy capital to focus on replication of smaller companies, not just on scale of a handful. The idea that small companies can also represent a sustainable path to last mile access is supported by previous GDC research, which found that smaller, typically local distributors tend to operate lighter structures and focus on profitability first. As a result, many have achieved more sales per dollar of capital raised than their larger international counterparts. Frontier Markets is one example of a last mile distributor that has achieved profitability. And to talk a bit more about how they've done that and their path to sustainability, despite not following a traditional growth path, I'll now hand over to Ajita.
Great, thanks so much, Charlotte. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on this call. So I think that for just a quick brief on what Frontier Markets does and how we actually operate on the ground. So we have been in operations for the last 10 years. We work in rural India. Our core focus has really been connecting all different types of products and services to the last mile through doorstep delivery to the rural customer. And when we say rural, we're talking about really remote rural villages. We don't work in urban towns. We only work in villages that have a population size from anywhere of 200 households up to 10,000 households. The way that we actually deliver our solutions is it's a tech and a high touch model. So we have a network of rural women entrepreneurs that we call Saril Jeevan Sahelis or Easy Life Friends, who are using our technology platform. We have an assisted e-commerce platform that we have designed for these rural women. And they're using that technology to basically be able to collect data, showcase products, onboard customers, and then be able to help them in making their online purchases for various different segments. Based on that information that comes into us, we're able to then draw insights and curate our solutions so that we really are focusing on data-driven or insight-driven decisions to help rural customers make purchase decisions faster. We have about 12,500 women entrepreneurs today, 500,000 customers, and we've sold about 10 million solutions till date. And as Charlotte mentioned, we've been profitable for the last 5 years. So our profitability strategy, I think, has been based on two critical principles. One is, instead of scaling wide, we chose to scale deep, meaning that the areas that we've been operating in, we made a conscious decision to not move to new geographies too fast, because ultimately that would have been a widened, larger level of investments, because at some level, anywhere where our branches are operating, there is going to be at least a 12 to 14% operational expense at loss, right? While you're building your customer base and while you're trying to really understand, who your women entrepreneurs are going to be and whether they're going to be effectively able to do the work that you're asking them to do. So by going deep, you were able to optimize your reach. You were able to increase more customers, because when you convert one customer and they're satisfied, 4 other customers respond, right? I think a lot of us know this in terms of what makes the rural market so interesting, right? There is a viral effect if you do good interventions. So that really helped us well, because we were able to really optimize our infrastructure and then add to the second piece of our strategy, which was diversify our product portfolio. So for the same customer that we've been serving, we consciously made sure that our rural women entrepreneur was able to look at this with a customer lifetime value perspective, or be able to sell diversified products, offerings, and services. So this ranges everything from agricultural services, financial services, digital payments, consumer durables, clean energy products, and now even essential services in response to COVID. It worked quite well, because then one woman was able to essentially see that she could do anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000 worth of sales in a month, and then actually earn solid income, which also created stickiness. And I think these two critical pieces have allowed us to be profitable by being able to look at that. Final thing that I'll say is that beyond distribution, and I think this is something going to be true for all of us that are distribution companies, as we're starting to look at the role that we play in terms of tech and connecting rural customers, there are ways to diversify our revenue streams beyond selling products. And this has been another instrumental piece for us, which has been leveraging data insights and selling those insights to bigger brands, looking at where you can do work in reverse logistics. So really diversify your revenue streams in such a way that allows you to then just say that profitability won't be just based on selling products to poor people at low margins, but actually being able to create new margins that will allow you to then run your operations at scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajita. Okay, so let's take a look now at 3 key opportunities that have emerged over the last 3 years. So firstly, Crowdfunding is an increasingly important source of funding for distributors and the most common source of debt for GDC members due to the relatively light touch due diligence and fast turnaround. Although historically Kiva has been the only crowdfunding platform doing transactions of less than $500,000, new players have entered this space. This includes Charm Impact, who provide debt and who have funded at least 7 of our members to date, and Wagenzi, who provide equity. Secondly, we are seeing a growth in the number of models that bundle equity with technical assistance or prepare distributors for equity by building their investment readiness capabilities. Venture Builder, for example, a specialized intermediary investor launched in 2019, has supported 10 local distributors to date with enterprise development services and has entered into commercial partnerships with 3 of these. Another example is the Get Invest Finance Readiness Support Facility, which targets local energy companies with in-depth advisory support along their fundraising journey. And finally, growing digitalisation has led to new opportunities to use data to streamline the due diligence process and reduce transaction costs, making it possible for funders to offer smaller ticket sizes and potentially invest in smaller distributors. The SEMA and Gaza Distributor Finance Fund is one example. Another is the Receivables Finance platform launched by PayGops and First Growth Ventures last year. And to tell us a bit more about this platform, I'll hand over to Sitan.
Thanks, Charlotte. So in general, Solaris, what we do is develop software for last mile distributors to enable and digitize the process of providing products on credit to their customers. And we built this technology in general to solve the problems that we saw, that we faced as last mile distributors ourselves. And one of the problems out of many was, as you saw before in previous slides, was the financing aspect, and more specifically, managing the receivables financing. So 2 issues that we saw that we could try and solve with our receivables purchasing platform was, on one side, this imbalance that you see between giving flexible payment terms to the end customers, which makes predictability of cash flows difficult, and on the other hand, managing the institutional debt, traditional debt funds that are rigid and need repayments on specific payment schedules. So that balance needs to be managed and maintained by the last mile distributor. And then the second issue being, as mentioned, this minimum ticket size, being that transactions usually incur heavy due diligence and legal costs to carry out. So that pushes up this minimum size that a traditional investor would need to make to be efficient. So with the receivables purchase platform, what we've done as PayGops, as an extension of PayGops, is to allow third-party investors like First Growth Ventures to take a look at portfolios of receivables from distributors, analyze the data and the performance, and then directly purchase off of that balance sheet and onto theirs, and therefore absorb some of that risk, that variability risk, as well as allow aggregation of the purchases across many different distributors and many different purchases over time. And through a standardized process, this reduces the costs of the transactions as well. So in general, that allows the distributors to have another tool for financing receivables, allows added liquidity over their assets, and that could fuel growth and scale for the distributors. So yeah, happy to talk about it, discuss that further in the breakout sessions afterwards.
Thanks so much, Sitan. Okay, so let's move on to have a look at some sources of finance that remain underexploited. So a handful of distributors are having success with carbon finance, but distributors typically don't have the necessary scale, and accreditation and verification processes are highly complex and require a large upfront investment. Some of these challenges can be overcome by working through intermediaries, such as Solstrom, which simplifies the process for smaller companies and has already partnered with GDC member ILU Mexico in Mexico. Aggregation could also be used in the case of carbon finance via pooling facilities. A number of distributors have been able to access results-based finance, and they tend to like it because it's reliable, long-term, and it's objective. As one GDC member said, it's not about whether a funder likes you or your model, either you've sold a product or you haven't. But distributors report significant challenges around how RBF programs are managed, with a need for faster disbursement, more streamlined monitoring, reporting and verification, and larger upfront payments and/or affordable bridging financing until agreed milestones are met. Local funders are still sparse in the space. Only 1% of capital raised by the 21 GDC members that we interviewed last year was from local institutions. Concessional capital is needed to increase the risk appetite of local banks, as we are seeing from pioneering models like Aceli Africa in the ag space. Okay, let's move on to trend 2, the rise of digitalisation. This is the most dramatic shift in the LMD sector since 2019, massively accelerated, of course, by COVID. So digitalisation is happening in all business functions at the company, field team, and customer levels. As this enabled digital quote says, while a few years ago distributors were forced to build their own in-house solutions, distributors are increasingly accessing digital services from established third-party providers. And there are 4 key areas in particular in which digitalisation has accelerated. The first and perhaps most innovative trend is the rise of assisted e-commerce. This is e-commerce, but tailored for last mile customers by leveraging offline capabilities like local agents and payments in cash. Some distributors are building their own platforms, while others, like Econome in Kenya, are partnering with digital service providers. And this particular innovation was actually supported by the GDC's Innovation Challenge last year. The second key trend has been the rise of digital marketing. This is being embraced, particularly by those distributors with strong customer data, as companies can target specific demographic groups or customers in a given geographical location with key messages. Mwezi, for example, is pioneering the use of geolocation data to send SMS messages when a customer is in close proximity to a particular product or service. The third key trend is in field staff training. During COVID-19, many distributors switched to undertaking some or all field staff training online. Sistema Bio, for example, launched the Sistema Academy for its sales team. Many distributors are continuing to use online training because it's cost effective and it lends itself to peer learning across regions, but offline components are still seen as essential. And finally, digitalisation has accelerated in the provision of after-sales service. Zonful Energy, for example, has set up an in-house Uber-like app for solar home system technicians. And to tell us a bit more about how Zonful has gone digital, I'll hand over to William. Oh, we can't hear you there, William. Are you able to unmute? There we go.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I hope you are going to forgive me. My network is not all that good, and I hope everyone is hearing what I'm saying. My name is William Ponela, as already mentioned. I'm the CEO for Zonful Energy, a solar company which is based in Zimbabwe. I would like to just give you a brief on the digitalization after sales service which we have introduced. As you know, Zonful is a last mile distributor. We focus mostly to deal with distributing solar home systems and productive use energy in the rural areas. So what we did after the outbreak of COVID, it was now difficult for us to even to send our technicians to attend to problems which customers have in their homesteads. And because of the restrictions which COVID-19 brought about. So what we did, we came up with a system whereby a customer would just phone into our call center, and then the call center agent would raise a ticket to a technician. So the concept of the technician is Uber-like system where the first person to take the ticket and attend to the problem is the person who actually gets paid. So the whole idea is we were lucky that we had actually overtrained our sales agents and technicians. So to find out that when we introduced what we call a hybrid system in terms of our pay-as-you-go, it was comprised of both a physical store as well as the e-commerce element. So it becomes very easy for us to attend to most of the clients, because the movement within the communities was now restricted. But now it's simply because we had technicians who were actually based in those areas, and we had not to. There was no need for us now to move physically to see the technicians. So what happens? The way this thing works is very simple. A customer will just phone into our call center, and then the call center would pick up the location of the customer and raise a ticket to a respective number of technicians who are very close to where the customer is phoning from. So the first technicians to take up the job and do it would have the client actually confirm that the job has been done and it has been done successfully. And as a result, the agent is automatically paid their money through mobile app without necessarily have to come back to the office. So this has actually helped us to make sure that our customers continue having the services which they've been having even well before the COVID-19. And it has actually unleashed a new model of business, which we have since continued and grown after the COVID era. And we are now in the process of making sure that this is going to be encompassed as one of the new methods in terms of recruiting the agents as well as technicians who would be installing things in different places. It's cost effective, and you don't need to have people moving around a lot, because most of the work they do it within the vicinity, within the walking distances in the areas which they live. Thank you.
Thanks so much, William. And you can obviously hear more from all our speakers in the breakout groups later. So as we've seen, digitalisation is unlocking new opportunities, and distributors are likely to continue to ride the digital wave, especially as more and more customers are coming online. This is having a substantial impact on the efficiency of last mile distribution business models and making it easier for companies to scale up operations, enter new markets, and diversify product offerings. Digitalisation is also enabling distributors to collect more and better quality data, and this helps to unlock finance, as we spoke about earlier, but also for the first time we are seeing distributors truly monetize data and insights at the last mile. So as Ajita mentioned earlier, Frontier Markets is doing this through its agent network for clients including manufacturers and big corporates. But there are important caveats here. Firstly, offline activities remain critical for distributors to build trust and brand recognition, to provide agents and customer education, and for after-sales service. Secondly, many distributors operate in markets that are not ready for a digital transformation. There are challenges around digital literacy, and not all customers are comfortable with or capable of using digital payments, and there is a gendered component here too. And distributors struggle to find solutions that match their specific needs. Most service providers don't offer a full suite of functionalities, which means distributors tend to use multiple, often unconnected solutions, and affordability is a barrier, particularly for smaller distributors. Okay, so straight on to the third trend, product diversification. So it seems that distributors have found the sweet spot of product categories. This graph shows the number of GDC members selling different product categories: health products, water and sanitation products, agricultural inputs, off-grid solar products, and so on. As you can see, there has been a 12% increase in the number selling more than one product category. But this data masks the true breadth of product baskets, since the vast majority of distributors sell more than one product within each product category. For example, those selling products in the health category are likely to sell a combination of medicinal products, sanitary products, contraceptives, and so on. While those selling products in the off-grid solar category are likely to sell solar lights, home systems, fans, TVs, etc. This diversification within product categories increased due to COVID-19, as many distributors sought to mitigate supply chain disruptions by sourcing new suppliers and new kinds of products. However, it's interesting to note that only one distributor that was already selling 2 or more product categories has added additional categories since 2019. Moreover, if we look at all our data, the average number of product categories sold by GDC members remains unchanged since 2019 at 2.1. This may be because there are serious challenges in managing multiple product categories, not just in terms of supply chain management, but also agent and retailer training, marketing and finance. It can also create confusion at the customer level as it detracts from a single clear value proposition. As such, moving forward, we expect to see distributors double down on diversifying within the categories they already sell, rather than moving into new product categories. This will provide more opportunities for revenue generation and offer consumers greater choice, while maintaining a coherent offer and efficient business processes. Distributors can diversify alone or in partnership, as GDC member S-Mart has done by absorbing the operations of One Acre Fund in India earlier this year. So to talk a bit more about this partnership and S-Mart's overall product basket, which is unusually diverse with over 400 SKUs, I will hand over to Prashant.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, I'm Prashant Venkatramana. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of S-Mart. S-Mart is a last mile distributor that runs a tech-driven network of over 4,500 rural shopkeepers in 5 states in India. As Charlotte said, we recently acquired the operations of One Acre Fund, and we expanded into new categories as well. For us, diversification started right from the first year of our operations, which is close to 10 years ago. Primarily, it was because of the seasonality and because of the variance in geographies in a diverse country like India. More recently, however, we've expanded in our offerings into agricultural inputs, agricultural related services such as soil testing, and even formalized credit to farmers. However,
Prashant, I seem to have lost you. Are you there, Prashant?
Yeah, I think we've lost him.
Yeah, I think we'll carry on, and we can always jump back in, or that's just another reason to join his breakout group later. Okay, so jumping straight back in, the most dramatic trend in evolving product baskets since 2019 has been the growth in the number of distributors selling productive use technologies. 35% of GDC members are currently selling these products, which is up from just 6% in 2019. Productive use technologies cover a broad spectrum of products. Those sold by distributors include solar water pumps, sold by 26% of GDC members, and refrigerators, sold by 14%, as well as egg incubators, solar dryers, and solar mills. The productive use technology category also holds the greatest interest to members, with 21% stating that they are interested in selling such products in the future. And this is closely followed by agri-inputs and cook stoves cookers, both at 20% of members. But many productive use technologies are much more complex than products traditionally sold by distributors. They're often highly technical, requiring extensive tailoring in their design, specific marketing and sales approaches, access to production inputs and markets, and specialized expertise for installation. They must also be accompanied by long-term financing and strong after sales, and distributors need help to build their capabilities to sell these products. Finally, on the note of changing product baskets, we're excited to see a handful of distributors testing the water with nascent products like e-cooking technologies and e-mobility technologies, e-bikes, batteries, and conversion kits. We'll be watching these spaces closely moving forwards. So after—
Sorry, Charlotte.
Oh, hi, Prashant.
Yeah, hi.
Brilliant.
Maybe I'll just try to conclude quickly.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say that diversification alone cannot be seen as a silver bullet solution. There are some risks associated with diversification. One could be that you could be spreading yourself too thin. It might affect things like your training strategy, your sector-focused approach, and sometimes it might even give an impression to your team and other stakeholders that you haven't figured out yet what you're doing. So you've got to be a little bit careful and calculated about diversification sometimes. Sometimes even moving into multiple categories affects your working capital management and can put you in a delicate position if you're looking to extend your runway or looking for further funding. So our strategy was to listen to our primary customer, that's the shopkeeper. And since we were already in rural areas, it was kind of a no-brainer that we got into agriculture further. 70% of the Indian population in rural areas is already engaged in agriculture. So we went deeper into agriculture, and it proved to be a rewarding yet challenging opportunity, especially during the pandemic when we saw an increase, almost doubling our overall revenues thanks to moving closer to the end customer, that is the farmer in rural areas, and listening to our primary customer, that's the shopkeeper in our network. Sorry about my network. I think my computer got overheated, but I'd be happy to discuss much more in the breakout sessions. Thanks again, Charlotte.
Perfect. Thanks, Prashant. Okay, brilliant. So jumping straight back in to after sales support and quality, which are more important than ever. And almost all GDC members offer some kind of after sales service. This includes warranties, but also safety checks and other monitoring, maintenance and replacements, support with selecting spare parts and ongoing customer training. The proportion of members offering warranties has increased from 65% in 2019 to 90% in 2022, as most new GDC members offer them. In the energy access sector, despite a large grey market of non-quality verified products, distributors are proving that quality sells. Among GDC members selling solar lights and home systems, 92% sell products that meet Verisol quality standards, while 70% of members selling cook stoves and/or cookers sell products that meet iOS voluntary performance targets. Okay, on to the final trend, consumer financing. So today, 78% of GDC members offer consumer financing, a growth of 9% since 2019. We expect this trend to continue with increasing adoption of PayGo software, yet consumer financing represents the second biggest challenge for distributors after access to finance, and was never harder than at the peak of the pandemic when customer ability to repay was severely hampered. Whilst most distributors would prefer not to manage consumer financing in-house, they don't always have a choice. Some distributors have been successful in partnering with microfinance institutions, more commonly in South Asia, but this is often not possible due to the relatively small transaction sizes, the high risk nature and remoteness of customers, and the fact that MFI procedures and skill sets are often ill-suited to financing physical assets. Managing working capital is hard for any last mile distribution business, including those selling products in cash only, but it's exacerbated for companies providing consumer financing, since this directly increases their working capital needs. Distributors have particularly struggled to manage receivables and the accompanying credit risk. This has created a difficult cycle for distributors since they can't extend consumer financing without working capital, but can only access working capital if they can effectively demonstrate a clear credit risk management strategy and execute it through consistent collections. Honestly, we know quite little about how distributors are managing their working capital and how this has changed over time. We are not aware of many distributors collecting data or setting KPIs around working capital, like working capital ratios or time to cash. More research is needed to understand what distributors are doing and what further levers they can pull to improve their management of working capital. Historically, distributors have tended to decentralize credit risk management to agents or retailers who rely on their judgment to assess customer creditworthiness and chase repayments via phone calls. Distributors have also tended to tie sales agent and retailer incentive structures primarily, if not exclusively, to sales, meaning they are not incentivized to assess creditworthiness or encourage ongoing payments over time. Increasingly, however, and spurred on by COVID-19, distributors are appreciating the importance of good credit risk management. Distributors are adopting different strategies to manage credit risk depending on their size, stage of growth, and the products that they sell. And to tell us a bit more about this is Holger. Over to you, Holger.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Good afternoon, morning, evening, everybody out there. My name is Holger. I'm working as a risk management consultant for the consultancy arm of Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, a German-based university. Guess for what? Finance and Management and consultancy company. And I'm doing risk management consultancy in the MSME financing world. And since quite a while, I would say that asset finance, small scale asset finance and last mile distribution has become quite a pillar of that financing world, and facing actually the same challenges which other finance companies also face. And as Charlotte said, we see that providing credit or making receivable finance is more driven by necessity, as this is another pillar to create additional sales. But most companies actually would prefer not to do that if they could. And that's simply where they are. And what we can see, and we are quite happy to say that, is that there is increasing understanding and increasing awareness for credit risk management in that small scale asset finance and last mile distribution world, not only on the bigger companies, but also on the smaller ones. And the way I look at that is that credit risk management has two components. One is the post-loan or post-receivable kind of credit risk management, which includes monitoring and checkups and reminder calls and so forth, which more or less always has been in place. But the other thing, and I think that's the far more important thing, is the pre-loan or pre-receivable credit risk management, meaning finding out in advance if a customer is eligible for a loan, if I may call it loan, or not. And that is where we see a challenge, but also increasing awareness and increasing efforts to come over that. And that can be just a simple thing like a second line of defense, as we call it, meaning an independent risk management function of typically full-time or part-time employed people who have a dedicated look at credit risk and judge with their experience, or, and that is my personal passion, we have heard about a lot today about digitization, with the help of collected data, developing data-driven risk management tools which can allow or which help you, support you to find out in advance if a customer is eligible or not, or to which amount she might be eligible. And the other thing is the incentive world, what you've said, Charlotte, that also is increasingly understood. And these are the topics which I would love to talk to you and also hear a little bit from you guys where you stand and which challenges you face. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you, Holger. So yeah, picking up where we left off, while the sector is still immature, we expect to see distributors become more sophisticated in how they manage consumer financing, especially as they continue to digitalize operations, which will enable more data-based decision-making. Over the long term, this will increase their efficiency, help them to attract more working capital, and enable them to serve more customers. There is a danger that improved risk management will result in distributors moving upstream to serve less risky customers, as has arguably happened in the microfinance sector. Distributors will need to balance their commitment to improving last mile access to affordable products with their need to ensure portfolio quality. This is key to ensure distributors avoid high default rates, as well as over-indebtedness of their customers, particularly as they move to sell higher value products. So the key takeaway from our member data and wider research is that the last mile distribution sector is not only impactful, but resilient and increasingly professional. LMDs continue to face challenges, but overall they are growing, achieving impressive levels of impact, and they are efficient in how they use capital. Despite initial fears about the potential ramifications of COVID-19, the sector has well and truly weathered the storm. Distributors are still concentrating on serving low-income and remote customers with a greater variety of beneficial products and a stronger focus on quality and after sales. In addition, companies are becoming more sophisticated in operations, particularly in terms of how they collect and use data, how they approach sales, after sales and marketing, and how they manage credit risk. If LMDs continue to build on these successes and ride the wave of digitalisation, the outlook for the sector looks bright. But this will heavily depend on whether LMDs can access the finance they desperately need, of the right kind and at the right stage of growth, and on the capacity of the sector as a whole to learn from distributors' experiences to accelerate growth and impact. Thanks, everyone. That concludes part one, but we're going to roll straight into part two of the presentation today, which is looking at the GDC Strategy 2022 to 25. So as you've just heard from me, obviously, since 2019, the GDC has learned a huge amount about the last mile distribution sector, largely thanks to the insights that our members and many of you on the call today have shared. These insights help us to understand not only the state of the sector, but our role within it, including where the GDC is uniquely placed to add value and drive activities forwards, where we should be helping others to better support distributors, and really importantly, what is out of scope for the GDC. So over the last 9 months, we've developed our 2022 to 25 strategy, our guiding light over the next 3 years. This went through consultations with our members, our advisory council and external experts. A big thank you to everyone who took the time to share feedback, you know who you are. And as a team, we're incredibly excited about what the next 3 years will bring for our membership and for the wider sector. We really hope that our strategy sings to you and that you see alignment with your own activities, which you can tell us more about in the breakouts. So I'm just going to take a few moments to set the scene before handing over to fellow GDC team members Emil Schmitz and Lucy Klarsfeld-McGrath from Boppink and Heistra respectively to tell us more. Okay, so first, let's just recap on the principles that sit at the heart of the GDC. Our ultimate vision is a world in which all communities have access to beneficial products that improve their lives. And the GDC's role in that is to help last mile distributors make beneficial products available and affordable to all. And we do this in two complementary ways. First, by helping distributors improve business performance by providing and enabling others to provide solutions and services that help save time, reduce costs, build capacity, and develop catalytic partnerships. Second, by building a collective voice for the sector, by generating and sharing learnings, raising the profile of distributors, and helping the broader ecosystem to work effectively with distributors to achieve shared impact goals. So with that in mind, and reflecting on the range of GDC activities that we've undertaken to date, we believe our two biggest successes have been, one, enabling our members to access knowledge and opportunities that help strengthen their businesses. In fact, 69% of members that responded to our recent survey said the GDC has helped them to introduce new business practices. And two, building a more connected LMD sector and raising its profile. 79% of members say that the GDC has helped them to achieve a greater sense of connection to the wider LMD community. And these reflections are echoed by an independent evaluation of the GDC that's just been undertaken, which found that the GDC has had significant success in achieving sustained impact on some elements of the system it is operating in, notably in addressing the lack of visibility of the last mile sector and the limited access LMDs have to information. Okay, so now let's turn to the areas that we need to work on. So where do members want more support? Well, by far the highest demand for more support from the GDC is in access to information and support around investors for loans and equity, grant providers, and so on. So access to finance was not a key focus of the GDC when we started, but it increasingly became clear how important this was. And we've ramped up our work in this area over the last 12 months with much more planned in the future, as you'll see shortly. This is followed by support on skills development with priority topics including e-waste management, fraud prevention, sales and stock control, and digitalisation of core processes. And the independent evaluation also highlighted areas to improve, namely tailoring training services depending on distributor stages of growth and driving replication of innovations piloted through the Innovation Challenge. And you'll hear shortly from Lucy and Emil how we are planning to address these demands and recommendations moving forwards. So the big picture question, what impact do we want the GDC and our members to achieve? First, we aim for the GDC membership as a whole to reach 10 million people in the year 2025 specifically. That's up from 6.4 million in 2021. Second, we aim for GDC members' businesses to grow, with the average number of people reached per GDC member being 50,000 in the year 2025 specifically, again up from 32,000 in 2021. And to help us better understand the added value of the GDC services and support specifically, we will also track the average annual percent of GDC members reporting improved business performance as a result of new business practices or new business partnerships attributed, at least in part, to GDC activities, with a target of 75% of GDC members. And the amount of new funding committed to the LMD sector, again, that can be attributed, at least in part, to GDC activities, with a total target of $20 million between now and 2025. So you've heard where we want to go, but how do we intend to get there? Over to Lucy and Emile to tell us more.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. Great to see so many people on the call today. My name is Emile. I work with Bob Inc., one of the 3 founding partners of the GDC, and currently calling in from Ethiopia. Like Charlotte said, we are very ambitious on the way forward and have fleshed out our strategy further. And there are 3 work streams that we're going to focus on that are really aimed at helping our members, the last mile distributors, to improve their business performance. The first one is all around accelerating innovation. I think we all realize that the context that we're all operating in is fast moving, and we really want to make sure that our GDC members will stay ahead of the game, that they will remain future-proof as well, given all the changes that are happening. And so this work will really build on the innovation challenges that we ran in the past, seeing if we can replicate them further. But it will also focus on funding and providing further support to the members to develop, test, and showcase some of these innovative business practices. There are 2 topics that are highlighted here, which might not surprise you. I think we're going to focus a lot on digital innovation. It will have a tremendous impact, but we're also keen to look at the circular economy and what opportunities are there to work with LMDs and drive impact also on that level. The second work stream that we have defined to help distributors is around building capacity. Charlotte just mentioned that after access to finance, I think there's a strong need from our members to help them in skill building. And this happens at 2 levels. This happens at management level, as well as building the skills of the agents doing the sales in the field. And so this will build on some of the training programs that we ran also last year with a few cohorts. And we really want to replicate that, but also take that to the next level. See if we can create specific segments of LMDs that fit in terms of maturity level. See if we can really work with cohorts and possibly adopt more of an accelerator model where we can support them offline and online to go through a process together. Because we realized there was a lot of peer learning and peer exchange within the training facility that we rolled out, and we really want to leverage that ultimately. And then the last work stream focused on helping distributors to improve their business performance is around basically matchmaking with other partners and service providers. So enabling access to product suppliers and services in a very easy way. So this builds on existing programs or work that we did, for example, on the digital service catalog that enables members to quickly look for the right digital service providers that are even peer reviewed by other members. But we want to take that to the next level and really make sure that both the providers and the suppliers can get very easy and quick access to LMDs and the other way around. And so that will be around guidance tools and support to help them select the right products and partner with those best, most appropriate suppliers. So those are 3 work streams we're going to focus on. We're all very excited about, and we hope that will really add more value to the members in the next 3 years. Now over to Lucy to talk more about the work streams that will impact the ecosystem or the enabling environment.
Thanks a lot, Emile. So indeed, next work stream. So I'm Lucy Klarsfeld-Magro. I'm a partner with Hystra, the 3rd founding partner of the GDC. So as Charlotte mentioned, I think the biggest challenge that last mile distributors have told us about is really access to finance, which is both a challenge for the ecosystem because funders, on the other hand, really struggle to find accessible and attractive targets for their investment or their grants. So the idea is really to play a brokering role in this access to finance piece by providing tools, resources, and also providing a bit of matchmaking on that aspect to really make sure that both sides are able to connect and better match each other's needs. That could include a benchmarking exercise, like a benchmark or a diagnostic tool to really help both distributors and investors understand better where they stand in terms of performance, as well as additional resources. A second work stream we want to focus on, as this proves, is really continuing to provide market intelligence and conducting research on key pieces for the sector to inform decision making and to continue to give a bit of a voice to the sector and more visibility to the sector. And that will include topics such as profitability, which some people in the chat have mentioned remains a challenge, as you've rightly followed in this presentation. And another key point that we want to better understand is the link between last mile distribution and the last mile distributors who are part of the GDC membership that somewhat organize either their sales agents or the retailers they work with, and informal retail. So that's probably going to be a key focus for this research as well. And finally, the last bit we want to keep focusing on is member engagement and advocacy. So as you've seen in the statistics that Charlotte shared, this is something our members have really seen value from, learning from each other, learning from the research that we've mentioned above. So the idea is really to keep promoting exchanges between members and matchmaking between everyone in the sector as required, and continuing to raise the sector profile and kind of push the knowledge, research, and also the fantastic things that our members do, which are often not known enough. So I will stop there to give a couple of minutes to, I'm not sure if it's Jess or Charlotte who will conclude at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I'll take over from here. So yeah, please do get in touch with any feedback on the strategy, or if you'd like to partner with us on anything that you've seen today.